Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Crimson Crossover podcast presented by the Field of 68. I'm Christian Sykes, joined as always by Charles Branch and Joey Blackwell. How you guys doing today?
I'm glad this podcast got to go another week. we're, we're in the end game now. We got potentially two more episodes left, or this could be our last one other than our season recap. Who knows? But glad to be talking with you guys for at least one more week.
Yeah, glad to see that my speech really impacted the players and we got a lot of rebounds on Sunday night. But no, great performance against St. Mary's. And, if you can't give max effort from this point forward, then I don't really know what to say. But to be back in the Sweet 16, to continue to, add numbers to banners that we already have in Coleman Coliseum with the potential to still add more banners this regular season is awesome. Very appreciative of the team, very appreciative of Coach Oates, and ready to start looking into this game against BYU and what we got to do to beat the Cougars.
Yeah, what the only, and I kind of mentioned this on the space a little bit. The my only sticking point, and I know we can talk briefly about the game versus St. Mary's, is the team versus St. Mary's looked like a team that I was expecting the entire season, as far as like the maximum effort, getting to the boards, making their length, disrupt St. Mary's at the rim. I mean, especially in the first half. I mean, St. Mary's was awful in the first half at the rim. They didn't hit a three until the second half, when they kind of opened up the game a little bit. Um, but like you see that game, right? The St. Mary's game, and then you go look directly at the game before it, Robert Morris against a smaller team, and you're getting out rebounded by Robert Morris. You're getting beat 16-5 on the offensive boards by Robert Morris. Like that's I think the most frustrating thing about this team is like when they want to do something, they do it. And we talk about how this is lose and you're gone. Well, like why not have that mentality the last couple of weeks of the regular season where you lose a championship, which that's what they were talking about this entire season. They have four championships that they can win, right? They lost the Players Era Invitational, they lost the regular season, they lost the tournament championship in the SEC. So like why weren't you playing like your last game, like the every game on your schedule, the back half of the SEC was your season's over because you've lost one of your championships. I don't know why like it's just so frustrating. And so hopefully we get the Alabama that played against St. Mary's and not the Alabama that played against Robert Morris. It's just my thought.
What's crazy is you give up 16 offensive rebounds to Robert Morris and they turn it into 15 second chance points. And you still give up 15 offensive rebounds to St. Mary's. That's somewhat of what St. Mary's is built on the offensive side. I don't know about you guys, but what I felt like in giving up those offensive rebounds, though, is we still had five guys trying to rebound the basketball. It wasn't somebody from St. Mary's getting an offensive rebound and immediately putting it back up for 2 points. I looked it up. So St. Mary's had 9 second chance points in the game, a lot less than what Robert Morris did. And, if you look points per offensive rebound, you go from basically 1 point with Robert Morris to about half of that with St. Mary's. But I tried to dive in a little bit further, and five of the nine St. Mary's second chance points came from the free throw line. So the only way they're going to the free throw line is if you have somebody there and you just get tangled up and you get a foul or something like that. But that just proved to me that we were at least in the right position and trying to box guys out. And again, I feel like we had 4 and 5 guys inside the 3 point line, inside the paint, trying to get rebounds. So, in contrast to what we've seen in the past, where teams would get an offensive rebound and get a clean look, we weren't giving up clean looks to St. Mary's when they were getting offensive rebounds. And in 3 years, St. Mary's hadn't given up more than 80 points, and we hit 80 points in a slow tempo game. So what I hope that proves to this team is if you will focus on finishing out possessions, if we send five guys to the glass, we're still going to get our points, and we're going to get more points in a more high tempo game. But being able to finish out a defensive possession and not give up points when you've done a great job with first shot defense. Those are some of those just attention to detail things that we feel like has been lacking from this team. They didn't show up on Sunday. And I think that played a huge factor in us having a double-digit win against a really good defensive team coming into the second round.
I think on top of that too, it wasn't just O boards and second chance points. I think just our defense in transition in general was much better. Looking at, we had 11 turnovers on the day, which I was really impressed, by the way, with our turnovers in the second half. I think we only had 3. So I think going from 9 to 3 between halves was really excellent. But even though giving up 11 turnovers, though, we only gave up 8 points off of those turnovers. So I think just in general, I think our defense was better spaced. I think we had a lot tighter coverage, especially than we had against Robert Morris. Still not done. We're about to play a really good BYU team and potentially Arizona or Duke, which both, of course, don't even need to talk about how great of offenses those teams have. So there is still work to be done. But just in general, I really liked our defense, whether it was off of those O boards like you were talking about in the second chance points or in transition with the turnovers.
Yeah, the turnovers are still a concern for me. I've kind of harped on this quite a lot where like I think there's a sweet spot with the amount of turnovers this team needs in order to know that their offense is working properly. I think at times I think there are 3 lowest turnover games we've lost. Um, just because I think that they get hesitant and they don't run the offense properly. But a lot of those turnovers, I mean, we probably could have had like 6 turnovers. A lot of those turnovers are just guys just losing the basketball. It's not, oh, they're making a pass and the pass goes, you know, that strays and, that like that's fine. Or they make a pass, it gets tipped and the team's going the other way. It's like Mark Sears dribbling off his foot. It's LeBaron Filan going in the paint and not knowing what to do and gets ripped. Like that, those are the turnovers that are like fixable that are not being fixed. And I know it's the Sweet 16, so it's not really much that we can like you can't really change much now, but it's still frustrating to see like that's the type of things that we're looking at now, with only what max 4 games left. So
Right. On
um
the flip side of that too, the lack of how we are not generating turnovers on the defensive side, especially in the first half. Robert Morris had 1, St. Mary's had 0. As we get into this game with BYU, that is a little bit of a concern for me of just allowing teams to get into their offense, run their sets, and get into a rhythm.
yeah. Yeah. I I mean that's kind of what happened in the second half, right? Like where they started hitting threes. I mean, I think they hit like 3 or 4 threes in the second half because like we kind of just let them get into a rhythm. We were turning the ball over, being a little careless with it. But I think the positive side of that is St. Mary's makes a run, right? And they get it to within like what in the second half, like 6, 5, 6. And Alabama then extends it and keeps them at bay the entire game until the very end, where you extend it by 14 points. I think we got up at 12 by 12 at one point, and they hit a 3. I think we had a turnover, and then they hit a 2, and it got back down to what was that, like 7 points. But then you put Grant Nelson in, and he becomes the closer of that game and really like helps Alabama extend that lead. Or not Grant, that's in Robert Morris. I'm sorry. But my point being is that it's that kind of happened in the St. Mary's game where like the guys kind of locked back in and then they start extending that lead back out to the point where it almost felt like kind of what we've been harping on or talking about a lot this year, where when it becomes winning time to put an opponent away, Alabama hasn't done that. It felt like that's what Alabama did versus St. Mary's. Is you never felt like that lead was too small, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's like the concern that I was feeling in the second half was only looking at the past of where we've given up big leads only to have to hang on late. But honestly, watching that game, I felt like we controlled it almost from start to finish. I mean, I think they were up 1 point, maybe 5 to 6, with 17 minutes left to go in the first half. But I really felt like we controlled that game with how we played defensively, how we were attacking the boards, even though we maybe didn't close out as many possessions as we wanted to. But it was just one of those few games this year where you just felt like you controlled it from start to finish. Even though they made a little bit of a run, the concern came from the evidence in the past, not what was currently happening on the floor, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And we also have to remember this is a St. Mary's team that's done a pretty good job this year of since they play so slow, they've been pretty good at forcing opponents to play to their speed. And with Alabama being as fast, if you remember, I was saying that was one of my worries, which ended up not needing to be a worry at all, but still. Um, and I think that even I just think we really adjusted well to that in general. And especially with, we've seen playing too fast against opponents, we can get really careless. And I just didn't really think that was an issue. So I think that while we did have shortcomings and we didn't, play a perfect basketball game, I think things definitely could have been a lot worse considering that we were having to adjust to a tempo that we just really haven't played all season.
I'm trying to see how many possessions were in the game. Is that 70? I think it is 70.
I can try to see. Let's see.
I'm pretty sure we had 70 possessions in that game.
I do know that we held them to 0.94 points per possession. So
Yeah.
around 70 would be close to the number because I think we were at 1.14 points
Yeah.
per possession. Yeah.
Yeah. So you still almost kind of played. I mean, it was like an in-between pace. St. Mary's pace is they average 61.6. So you kind of split the difference where Alabama averages 75. St. Mary's averages, 61.6. Like that kind of splits it. But in the first half, I mean, Alabama had 34 possessions. Like you were almost playing at St. Mary's pace or closer to that than what you were doing in Alabama. But I think you kind of sped them up in the second half because they kind of got a little um, intentional with what they were trying to do. They had to score faster. My biggest thing for St. Mary's, just like not even talking from an Alabama perspective, but St. Mary's, you're down like 8 points with 3 minutes to go, and you're still taking 25 seconds off the shot clock when you're down like 8 points. Like, I get playing intentional with like your tempo and playing within your system, but like when your season's on the line and you're trying to win a game, why not go and play like why not have some type of like I don't know, like 2 minute, you know, system where you're playing. It just didn't really make sense to me. It almost felt like once St. Mary's was like down 8 or whatever it was with 3 minutes to go, like they just were kind of just gave in the game. They're like, well, we're not going to win, so we're just going to slow it down. It just didn't really, I don't know. I don't know if you guys felt that way or it just was a little bit odd for me watching it.
No, they definitely. I felt like they waved the white flag a little bit earlier than I expected in the game. I'll give Coach Oates a kudos that we had the ball with 45 seconds left. And he decided to use one of those timeouts, which we know how he likes to hold on to those for a quick substitution to let some of St. Mary's back end players get some time on the floor. I think Max also got in at that time as well. But yeah, it kind of think that goes back to just how we controlled the game. That at some point they just knew they weren't going to be able to get enough stops, and maybe that's why they did play so slowly when they needed to speed it up, is they were really trying to rely on their defense, but our offense was just too good Sunday night and too efficient to where it just put it out of reach for them.
I'll give credit where credit's due though. I think Oates has gotten a lot better with those timeouts since the Tennessee game. I'll give him some credit there.
He's calling them like a madman. I'm telling you.
No, sometimes I'm like, wait. Maybe not yet.
Like I'm pretty sure maybe it was Randy Bennett that did it, but I thought it was Oates. I'm pretty sure their first three, there was an immediate timeout by Nate. Or it was either Nate or them on like it was one of them. And I was like, geez, like maybe it was something that Nate didn't, or I don't know why I'm calling Nate Oates. I always call him Oates.
Your old buddy Nate.
Yeah, my old buddy Nate that I've never talked to in my life. maybe it's like he saw something he didn't like, but yeah, there was a timeout right after they made their first three. And I was like, that's not what he does. That's not our coach. Um, yeah, I was very satisfied with the game. Um, I hope that this team takes B and I think they will. I hope they take BYU seriously. Um, BYU is a very good team. They're the number one offensive efficiency team since February 12th. Um, I will say I was doing a little bit of digging. BYU is 7-5 this season versus Kim top 50 teams. Two of those wins came in the tournament versus VCU and versus Wisconsin, obviously. Two of those wins came versus Iowa State at the end of the season when their best player was injured. Um, so like I kind of take out that Iowa State game or both those Iowa State games because Iowa State wasn't full strength. They weren't playing the best player on the Iowa State team. So like realistically, like BYU's 5-5 versus top 50 Kim Pom teams. Like Alabama, in my opinion, should win by 8-10 points in this game. That's just my opinion. I can't wait to get clipped and get proven wrong whenever Alabama loses, but that's just kind of my gut feeling going into the game.
BYU's shown an ability not only to lose games, but to lose games badly this year. They got blown out by Providence. They've gotten blown out by Houston, which Houston's obviously a really good team. But as I was diving into their schedule, they also lost a game at Cincinnati where I think they got beat by 20 points, but they lost the rebounding battle 31-17 in that game. Like,
Ooh.
like we talk about our rebounding challenges. One, I'd love to know how many possessions were in that game, but to only get 17 rebounds in a college basketball game at this level is just wild to me. But they are a team that is playing really, really well right now, a lot of momentum. And something that's interesting to me about this team, when you look at their metrics on KenPom, um, their offense, their number 9 in KenPom offense, 72 in KenPom defense. A team that we played this year in Missouri, where struggled, can talk about coming right off the Auburn game, can talk about it being on the road and that they really wanted that one. But Missouri's KenPom metrics are 8 in offense and 69th in defense. So I feel like there's a lot of similarities there between those two teams, even though the rosters may not be constructed the same way as far as size and things like that. I mentioned previously one of the concerns I have in a game like this, especially when you're playing a really good offense, is them getting into an early rhythm. And we're just not really a defense that puts a lot of pressure on teams and gets them out of rhythm a lot of times. We're not getting teams to turn them over. There have been times where we've made like a Kentucky or a Mississippi State uncomfortable, or making Auburn uncomfortable when we played at Auburn, but just not enough of those to have a lot of confidence around that. But one thing that does give me a lot of confidence going into this game, I understand Kevin Young's the head coach at BYU, and this is Kevin Young's team. Uh, but this is a team full of Mark Pope players. We've obviously had a lot of success against Kentucky this year, going 3-0. But if you look at the BYU roster, Richie Saunders it is a was played for BYU last year. Nell, Traore, Paul, Stewart, Baker, all guys that played at BYU last year. So one, I give the new coach a lot of credit for keeping those guys there. But it's a lot of guys that were fitting Mark Pope's system. And I know he's got his own offensive system, and there's a lot of similarities there too, as far as, Ken Palm rankings where BYU's 9 and Kentucky's 11. But we've seen offensive like this and had a lot of success against offenses like this. And knowing that Young's a guy coming from the NBA, and our defensive coach comes from the NBA, maybe some of the sets that he runs fits a little bit better for Brian Adams to scheme than what he's had to do against college coaches this year. So I do have a lot of confidence that they've got a very unique lineup where Igor Dimon's 6'9", one of the tallest players on their team. And yet their centers are 6'6", 6'8", 230, 240 pounds. So it was mentioned today in part of the media session where Philon said he was going to guard Saunders. I imagine Cliff's going to be on Keita as they start the game. Keita's about 6'8", 240. I could see Grant Nelson, if the knee's healthy enough to guard Dimon, 6'11" against 6'9". But then you got Nell, who's 6'5", and maybe that's somebody that Sears goes up against because Nell's only about 180, 190 pounds. And then Mag, who was a transfer from Rutgers into BYU, he's 6'7", 200. He'll have a couple inches on Youngblood, but maybe that's how we start out the game defensively. And then maybe need to make some quick substitutions just to match up a little bit better as far as how we want to. If Grant's, it's talked about how Grant's not really 100%. I think this could be a huge game for Jaron Stevenson on the defensive side. I think this could be a huge game for Darian Reed, obviously Mohamed Diabate. The bigs for BYU probably match up a little bit better for how Diabate wants to play, not giving up as much size. So it's a very interesting matchup. I do like what we're doing on the offensive side. It's one of those games where we can talk X's and O's and all that, but I really think it's about giving max effort on the defensive side and getting enough stops and ending enough possessions, because I think we can run our offense efficiently against BYU.
I think on top of that, it's also just about outlasting them. As far as, I know I bring up tempo a lot, but tempo is very important when you're talking about Nate Oates coach teams. BYU is 178th in KenPom and tempo. We're obviously, obviously number one. I think they're faster than who we just came off of with St. Mary's. But I think that when you're comparing them to that Missouri team, as you compared them to Charles, they're nearly identical in the offensive defensive efficiency ratings. Missouri is 111th in tempo. So Alabama had their struggles, but were able to take care of Missouri even with a tempo that slow. But BYU is even slower. So I don't think that will be that much of an issue for Alabama. I really think that we're going to have an episode recorded on Friday to talk about our Elite Eight matchup, just because I think this is a team that really stacks up against Alabama, that favors Alabama. And you're talking about, length and height. It's just, this is a game that is really going to show SEC is, when you compare it. And so I just really like this matchup when it comes to being an Alabama fan.
Here's the thing that I think is big for Alabama relative to BYU. BYU, and I might be wrong on this, reminds me a lot of the Brandon Miller led team in 2023. And what I mean by that is Igor Dimon is their best player, right? He's a 6'9" freshman, 180, 190 pounds, similar to how Brandon Miller was for Alabama coming in. I think Igor is obviously a better passer. He's more of a guard, like a facilitator type player. Than Brandon Miller was more of a shooter. But I do think that Alabama's experience, 1 through 5, can potentially hurt him to a point where you're relying on other people in BYU. And BYU is a great shooting team. I think they shoot like 38, 39% from three as a team. If you leave them open, this is another big thing. If you leave them open for open looks, they're going to make the looks. They're not St. Mary's that's going to go 0 for 11 from three, right? Like, you have to make sure that you're going over screens. You cannot go underneath the screen whatsoever, because if you do, they're going to take a shot and most likely you're going to make it. But I think with that Brandon Miller team, back to what I was saying, like, they really struggled with physicality from the point of attack from an opposing. That's why San Diego State did such a good job on Alabama, because they were able to out physical that Alabama team. And I think that that's what this BYU team, if they come up, I mean, when they played Houston, right? And I know Houston's a really good team, right? I understand that, but like when they played Houston, the with how prolific that offense was, or the offense was, Houston held them to 55 and 54 points because of how physical Houston is. I mean, Houston beat them by 31 points and beat them by 20 points in the two games that they matched up with each other. Texas Tech beat them by 5 points, held them to 67 points. Um, they've shown not a proficiency. They've shown, I mean, Mississippi or Ole Miss, like Ole Miss held them to 85 points. I know 85 points is a lot, but I think if Alabama holds them to 85 points, I think Alabama gets 90 plus in this game, right? So I think if you're physical at the point of attack, you're going over ball screens, not letting them just get these free open shots that are in rhythm. I really think that Alabama could have an advantage with how they've played if they play like they did for St. Mary's.
You just said something that I think is really key. You cannot go under ball screens. Cannot give these guys space to and allow them to shoot the three. You've got to make them drivers. You've got to funnel them in to Cliff and Grant and Aiden and Jaron and Diabate. If you can run them off the 3-point line, then you've really got to like our chances because we know how proficient we are at twos. And again, that also goes back to making sure we finish possessions, force them into a tough two, or just force them into a two. And when they miss it, make sure that that ball ends up in our hands and not back in their hands going up for another shot. But I've seen this. I think this team has done a much better job of fighting over screens, but we cannot go under screens tomorrow night.
Or we do what we've been doing in the tournament and switching everything because
Yeah.
that's what they've been doing. But I mean, that's going to require Cliff to not get out of position if he's on the court. And maybe it's like what you said, where we see more Mohamed Diabate, where we can switch and then Grant. So you have Grant more at the 5, Mo at the 4. Maybe you put Jaron in there. I also will say this: Mark Sears needs to figure out his jump shot. I looked at it in the tournament, and Jacob Pickle, he did a really interesting comparison where he looked at like seats that were, I don't know how to explain it, like flatter compared to like more upright seats. So like arenas that have seats like this compared to arenas that have like seats like this. And if you're listening on the podcast, I'm tilting my hand up and down. So just so that you can understand the visual. In arenas that have seats that are more flat, he shoots 30% from three. In arenas and this is on like a 500 shot sample size. So it's not a small sample size. On arenas that are seats are more upright, he shoots 40% from three. So the arena in Cleveland was flat because I think it was a hockey arena maybe. And the one in Newark is more upright from what he saw. So hopefully we're seeing some positive progression on that point of view. But Mark Sears is 10 of 27 from the field and 1 of 9 from three in the NCAA tournament. I think if you're trying to outscore a team, which you're going to have to do versus BYU, I mean, you want to outscore every team, but I don't think playing elite defense is what's going to win this game. I mean, I think if you can, then yeah, but I think both teams are so good offensively, it's probably not going to happen. You need Mark Sears to not go 0 from 3 or go 1 of 5 from 3. Like, it's not what we need.
His shot definitely looked a lot flatter back to kind of how it was at the beginning of the season this past weekend. When he was really on a roll, there was a lot more arc on his shot. So hopefully the shot trajectory is different this weekend. As you mentioned, different arena setup. Hopefully that helps into it as well. I think the biggest key is we've got Brian Anderson and Jim Jackson on the call for this regional. In the 3 games that they've called for us in the NCAA tournament, the 2 last year in the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8, and the second round game against Maryland, we're 43 and 95 from the 3-point line. So obviously those 2 guys together are doing something well for our 3-point shooting. So glad that CBS sent them to Newark. We'll let all the BYU, Duke, Arizona conspiracy theories start to percolate as we march our way to the Final Four with Brian Anderson and Jim Jackson back in attendance.
And I'm hoping Pickle with those the Picklelytics. I'm hoping that he's correct for these next two games, but then I hope if we make it to the Alamo Dome, he's really, really wrong because just because playing in a football arena, not exactly steep seats near the court for that one, but that's some good stuff right there.
Sorry, I'm looking at a photo of Houston Millette. They just posted it. And for those of you, I think Houston posted about this or something. Like I saw somewhere, I can't remember. He hasn't been with the team for 2 weeks. I'm pretty sure he had a cooking accident where he burned himself pretty badly. And there's a team photo, and legitimately, you can't even recognize him.
Oh goodness.
Yeah. So I apologize for being distracted, but like legitimately, like it looked like maybe potentially he had like a skin graft or something.
Man, that really sucks.
Yeah.
Hope he's all right.
Yeah. I apologize for getting distracted, but hopefully he's fine. That's crazy and unfortunate situation.
But
Um,
looks like we're playing in a hockey arena here too. Sorry, I just saw the Jersey Devils logos on the
Yeah.
seats
oh yeah, it
behind me.
is the New Jersey Devils arena, but I think the seats are still more
Yeah,
like
they
this
look to be
than
more steep. Yeah.
yeah. And it might just have to do with sight lines, right? Like you have a certain point where you're shooting and it changes when the sight light, which means that if we get to the final four, expect a negative shooting regression for Mark Sears because the seats are flat.
Well, I
So
mean, that happened a few years ago in the 2021 tournament. You know, they struggled in Hinkle against Iona, and then they went to what was then I think it was the uh, whatever the bank
Pacers.
field house
They
was
went to the
there.
Pacers arena.
Yeah, they went to the Pacers arena, just absolutely drained it from three, and
Yeah.
then of course went to Hinkle again for the Sweet 16 and lost to UCLA and had a terrible shooting night that night. So
Yeah.
there's some truth to it.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, do we want to talk a little bit about I don't think I have much more about the men's team. Do we talk a little bit about the women's team?
I guess we have to. That
I
was crazy.
mean, look. I'll say this. We'll go positive before we go negative. Sarah Ashley Barker going for 45, which was, by the way, was an SEC record for most points in the NCAA tournament by an SEC player. Also, the most points, I think, that's clearly a Alabama record as well. I think it was the most points ever in a game by an Alabama player. Um, and then not only that, the guts to hit 3 free throws when there's basically no time left on the clock to send it to double overtime when you're 70 something percent free throw shooter. Like when you talk about someone that is a representative for the University of Alabama or an example for like I don't want to be corny, but like when you talk about like writing your name in writing your name in Crimson Flame, whatever, like that's the type of thing like that like that's what that whole phrase is about is what she did. Like that's a legendary performance that's gonna go down in Alabama women's basketball history. But I will say this on the negative end. You were up 17 points with 2 minutes to go in the third quarter. You only had 12 minutes. Basically, you had 12 minutes left and you're up 17 points and you lose. So I it was frustrating, but what a legendary performance from her. And really successful season. I'm hoping eventually Christy Curry can break the the barrier that is this round of 32. So
And not just writing her name in Crimson Flame, but the Barker name obviously carries a lot of weight at Alabama with her dad being a national championship winning quarterback. Um, and I think even before this game, um, this wasn't going to be an issue, but it's not, Jay Barker's daughter or anything like that. It's Sarah Ashley Barker going forward. As you mentioned, the guts to hit those 3 free throws to send it to a second overtime. It's been a kind of a three musketeers, I guess, as you can say, between Aaliyah Nye, Zay Green, and Sarah Ashley Barker. Nine Green foul out in the fourth quarter, and yet she's still carrying the team. And she obviously had some help with Essence Cody and Carly Weathers and Christabel Azuma and Diana Collins. And that's, I understand the pushback from people as far as losing the lead and stuff like that. And that is frustrating. Um, when we were down 10 in the first half, I honestly was kind of like, here we go again. We get to this point with Alabama women's basketball and just can't get over the hump. And I give them a lot of credit for fighting back and building the lead up to 17. What really cost us in this game is just not having the depth. I mean, when you look at our starters, Cody fouls out with 5 fouls. Carly Weathers had 4 fouls. Sarah Ashley Barker had 4 fouls. I mentioned Nine Green also fouled out in the fourth quarter. That's where this program just needs to continue to bring in good players, continue to develop the players, have more depth. Because what really happened is we got into foul trouble and Maryland got into an offensive rhythm. They were knocking down shots, not only from the free throw line uncontested, but getting to the free throw line, knocking down threes, and just continue to whittle that lead down. We had some good looks at the rim too that just, cried off the rim, unfortunately. But to add some more context to this, I mean, this was an Alabama program that in 2001 was back in the NCAA women's tournament as a 10 seed and lost to Maryland, a 2 seed, 100-64. And 4 years now, yeah, Maryland's a 4 seed, but there really hasn't been much of a drop off in their program. And you go to their place, which that you could hear it. That was a very loud arena. They're also very fired up from what had happened the night before with their men's team hitting a buzzer beater against Colorado State. So looking for reasons to get excited and to get amped up. And you played them to double overtime. You know, all of our players should hold their heads high, not just from this game, but from the season. Did it end the way we wanted to, not getting to the Sweet 16 and the SEC tournament? No, it didn't. I think we would have definitely liked some better performances and to go a little bit farther. But what a way to go out. And this is one of those teams that you just it's a building block basically. And there's been a lot of building blocks before then. And I don't really understand the outrage. Maybe it's some people just trolling as far as Christy Curry and being there for 12 years. I don't think people really appreciate or understand how dead this program was. Like it was nothing. We had women who could not make a layup in a layup line. As the SEC continues to get better, as South Carolina becomes a great women's program, as LSU, starts being really good. And then you still got Tennessee, and now you brought in Oklahoma and Texas. And Alabama women's basketball is right there in the thick of it with all of them too. So I know I do a lot of sunshine pumping and a big cheerleader for the women's program. I just don't really think people really understand what Christy Curry had to build. And I also give Greg Byrne a lot of kudos for having the patience too, because we could be in purgatory like Auburn is with their women's program right now, continue to go through coaches. But we're now established and we've got good players coming in. And I don't think this is the end for Alabama women's basketball. I think it's going to continue to grow and continue to get better and hopefully not get back to those days in the mid 2000s where we were basically having winless SEC seasons and we're a laughing stock in the league.
Yeah. And didn't they bring in like the number one player in Alabama or something?
Yeah.
Like the all-time leading scorer or something like that.
Ace Austin, she's sick.
Yeah.
She can fill it up.
I hope like what you said, which is like a building block. Like it feels like they are building as far as like every year. Like I know that we got to the same point that we did last year, which was the round of 32, but like this one felt different, if that makes sense. And hold on, I'm about to sneeze. Sorry.
Bless you.
It felt different. It actually felt it sucks because like I really thought we were gonna win that game, and it would have been so cool to be able to go and play. Let's sneeze again. Go play in Birmingham, even though you probably would have lost the game to South Carolina, if we're going to be completely honest. Like, South Carolina's a very good team, but Alabama played well versus South Carolina the first time that they face each other. You never know in basketball, but I'm hoping that they can build on this, and especially losing a player like Sarah Ashley Barker. Um, it's going to be it's going to be big shoes to fill, but hopefully they can continue to gain momentum, and maybe we're hosting next year. That would be nice for the
Yeah,
freshmen.
and I think just missing out on the opportunity to play in Birmingham, like that is a big miss, but it was not for lack of effort.
Yeah,
It's not for anything. Maryland went and won the game. You have to give credit to Maryland. They did what they needed to win, and we did a lot of things that we needed to do to win too, and it just didn't
yeah,
go on.
I agree. Anything else on either basketball team? All right. Well, I will say we did post a Weekly Joe episode if you do like baseball, which is it's a sick episode. Like we have Alex Avila, MLB player. He went to the All-Star. He like, started in the All-Star game. Former Alabama great. Like go check it out. Alabama did lose the series to Tennessee, but they did take a game. They beat South Alabama on Justin LeBron walk-off last night. And then they have Oklahoma, who's like top 15 in the country, maybe top 10. I don't know where they fell in the rankings this week. Not fell, but like where they ended up in the rankings this week, coming into town. Charles, you said you're going to a game, right?
I'm gonna try to go to the game Saturday. I know we've got bad weather in Tuscaloosa. I'm hoping that it'll at least hold off in the morning, so I don't have to run the Tuscaloosa half in the rain. That would be miserable, but maybe a tied appearance in the Elite Eight will help me get through. But my goal is to try to stick around for the game, which I think is at noon on Saturday. But obviously, check out X, check out roll.tide.com or anywhere else you get your baseball news. Because I imagine there could be some adjustments trying to get that game in, or possibly trying to transition it to a doubleheader either Friday or Sunday because of potential weather issues.
Absolutely. Well, go check out Weekly Joe. Go to the Tuscaloosa if you're in town this weekend, for the baseball game. I'm not sure if the softball team's there, but
Softball's got a game against Georgia at the Rhodes House. I think men's and women's tennis are in Like it's a big week for Alabama athletics in Tuscaloosa. So hopefully the weather will hold off. But it'd be a great day to be around Tuscaloosa on Saturday and seeing a lot of Alabama athletics.
and then if you're in town and you're there for the game, go to Heat Pizza for the Elite Eight game that Alabama's going to be in when they beat BYU. But um, as far as our schedule, we'll have a post game space following the game versus BYU, and we will have a podcast on Friday because again we're winning. And if this gets clipped, I didn't say that, and we will have a podcast in a week and a half if we lose.
Once the tears stop flowing.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but that doesn't matter because I'm speaking a win into existence. So, also Sam's out of town, so I'm supremely confident that we are winning because she is in Costa Rica and then decided to go to Disney World for the next few days. So, um, other than that, I think we're good to sign off. We'll talk again soon. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Well,